The year is 1941. Imagine you're suspended in an ocean of black ink, thousands of feet above an invisible England. The only reality is the steady hypnotic drone of your Heinkel's twin engines and the faint green glow of the instrument panel. You're part of a German bomber crew, a spearhead aimed at the heart of a sleeping nation. Outside, there's nothing. No moon, no stars, just the suffocating dark that has always been your ally, your cloak of invisibility. The navigator leans in close, his voice a low whisper against the engine's roar, reading out the bearings. The altimeter needle quivers, a nervous tick in the machine's calm face. Your target is a factory in Coventry, a pinpoint on a map you memorized hours ago. Down below, Britain is a void, a country that has erased itself with blackout curtains and extinguished lamps. The darkness is absolute. It is your shield. Then, without warning, the shield shatters. Searing green-white lines of light tear past your cockpit impossibly close. Tracers. They come from nowhere, from the empty blackness where nothing should be. Your heart launches into your throat. The pilot yanks the control column, throwing the bomber into a stomach-churning dive. Panic, cold and sharp, floods the cockpit. Where did they come from? How could they see you? The gunners scream into the intercom, their machine guns chattering uselessly into the void. The attack is over as quickly as it began, leaving only the ringing in your ears and the acrid smell of cordite. The night is no longer a refuge, it has grown eyes. So how did this happen? How did the Royal Air Force solve the seemingly impossible problem of finding, tracking, and destroying an enemy it couldn't see? The answer wasn't just courage or luck. It was a revolution, whispered through radio waves and plotted in darkened rooms. While German crews flew into what they believed was a sightless sky, on the ground below, a network of colossal steel towers called Chainhome was listening. These were Britain's secret ears. Giant radar installations scanning the coastal approaches. They couldn't see the bombers, but they could detect them as faint pulses on a screen, painting a ghostly picture of the incoming raid. This information, this electronic ghost, was then fed into the nerve centers of the defense. The filter rooms and sector operations rooms. Here, in underground bunkers buzzing with quiet intensity, women of the WAAF moved wooden blocks across massive map tables. Each block was a raid, its altitude and direction updated in real time by plotters receiving a constant stream of information. It was a strange, disembodied form of warfare. The fate of cities and the lives of aircrews were decided by these calm, methodical movements guided by signals invisible to the naked eye. But this was only half the solution. Ground radar could find the swarm, but how do you guide a single fighter to a single bomber in the vast three-dimensional darkness? This is where the hunt became personal. The British deployed a new weapon, the Bristol Beaufighter, a powerful, heavily armed twin-engine fighter. But its deadliest weapon wasn't its 4 cannons. It was the strange, bristling array of antennas on its nose and wings. This was airborne interception radar, or AI. Inside the Beaufighter's cramped fuselage, a pilot and a radar operator worked as one. The pilot flew blind, trusting his instruments. Behind him, the radar operator, hunched over a small cathode ray tube, was his eyes. He wasn't looking for an aircraft. He was interpreting a dance of green light, a blip on his screen. Target 5 miles ahead, slightly to port, same height. His voice would crackle, calm and clinical, through the pilot's headset. The pilot wouldn't question it. He would adjust his course, guided not by sight, but by the disembodied voice of his navigator, who in turn was guided by the rhythm of invisible pulses. They learned to trust the machine, to follow the ghost. For the pilot, the enemy remained an abstract concept, a set of coordinates, a flicker on a screen, until the very last moment. Back in the German bomber, the tension is unbearable. The crew scans the oppressive darkness, seeing phantom shapes in every cloud. The intercom is a torrent of nervous chatter. They survived the first pass, but they know it isn't over. The unseen hunter is still out there, stalking them. The psychological shock is profound. The very element that was their greatest advantage the night has turned against them. It feels like a betrayal by nature itself. Suddenly, a new sound enters the German radio operator's headset. It's a faint, rhythmic hum, a pulse that doesn't belong to their own engines. He can't place it. He strains to listen, trying to decipher its meaning. Is it interference? Another station? Down below, through a break in the clouds, a cone of searchlights flares to life, miles away and pointing at nothing. They seem lost, sweeping the empty sky. But are they? The hum in the headset grows slightly stronger, a persistent electronic heartbeat in the background noise. The navigator whispers a course correction. The pilot grips the controls, his knuckles white. The rear gunner swivels his turret, his eyes trying to pierce the impenetrable black. None of them see the dark shape of the Beaufighter as it slides in smoothly from below and behind, positioning itself perfectly, guided by the ghost in the machine. The British pilot's thumb moves towards the firing button. What you saw wasn't just luck, it was a system. A vast, invisible web stretching across the British Isles. Deep in darkened filter rooms, information from coastal radar stations flooded in. Plotters, mostly young women from the WAF, moved markers across huge maps with croupier-like precision, tracking every hostile aircraft. Their plots were fed to the controllers, the conductors of this nocturnal orchestra. They sat hunched over their screens, speaking into headsets, their voices calm and measured as they guided their cats toward the mice. Miles away in the freezing, cramped nose of a Bristol Beaufighter, the radar operator hunched over his AI Mark IV set. The screen was a chaotic dance of static, a green line sweeping endlessly. Then a flicker. A blip. He'd call it out. Contact, red 40, range 4 miles. Pilot, staring into the inky blackness, would bank the heavy fighter, his gloved hands steady on the controls. The operator's voice would become a mantra of the hunt. Range 3 miles, holding course. Range 2 miles, slight turn to starboard. The blip on the screen grew stronger, clearer, resolving from a ghost into a solid arc of light. This was the moment, the final phase. The pilot would lean forward, straining his eyes. Angle off 10 degrees ... range closing. 800 yards. 600. Then, finally, the operator would call, "Tally-ho, visual." And there it would be, a fleeting silhouette against the faint glow of the stars. A Heinkel, a Dornier, just a few hundred yards ahead. The hunter had found its prey. For the German bomber crews, the British night was becoming a place of terror and superstition. They were flying into a ghost story. One minute they were droning along. The next, cannon shells were ripping through their fuselage from a killer they never saw. How was it possible? They tried everything. Weaving evasively, climbing above the reach of the probing searchlights, maintaining strict radio silence to avoid detection. But still, the losses mounted. Rumors spread like wildfire in the mess halls back in France. The British pilots, they whispered, were being fed carrots to give them superhuman night vision. Some even believed the RAF had pilots with literal cat's eyes, a biological mutation. Anything to explain the unexplainable, to rationalize the cold dread of being hunted by something they couldn't see, hear, or fight. Back in Britain, the boffins at the telecommunications research establishment were locked in their own battle. A battle of wavelengths and magnetrons. They were pushing the technology, refining the AI radar sets, squeezing out every last yard of range, every ounce of reliability. The jump to centimetric radar was on the horizon, a leap that would change everything. And with it, a new hunter was being born. The de Havilland Mosquito. Made of wood, impossibly fast, it was the perfect platform for the next generation of airborne radar. The operational leap was staggering. Crews trained in the new sets found they could see with astonishing clarity. The Mosquito night fighters weren't just defending Britain anymore. They were preparing to take the fight to the enemy. Oberleutnant Richter gripped the controls of his Junkers 88, his knuckles white. The attack had come from nowhere. One moment, the familiar drone of his engines. The next, a storm of fire. He'd thrown the bomber into a spiraling dive, the shrieks of twisted metal and the cries of his wounded crew filling his headset. He survived. Barely. Back at his base in occupied France, he stumbled from the cockpit, shaking. The ground crew saw the holes stitching his aircraft and the haunted look in his eyes. He wasn't the first to return like this. Richter's experience was becoming the new reality. The British were no longer just waiting. Their intruder missions had begun. Mosquitoes, now on the offensive, were stalking the German airfields themselves, circling like sharks in the dark, picking off bombers as they lined up to land or took off. The supposed safety of their own airfields was gone. The night war was shifting. It was moving across the channel, onto the continent. The hunters were getting faster, their methods more precise, and their reach was growing longer with every passing night. By 1943, the tables had turned. The night, once a cloak for the Royal Air Force, was now their hunting ground. Massive streams of 4-engine bombers, 100 strong, pushed deeper and deeper into the heart of Germany. But the Luftwaffe wasn't idle. They had built a wall in the sky, the Kammhuber Line. Imagine a series of fortified sectors, each a deadly box called a Himmelbett, or four-poster bed. Inside each box, Freya long-range radar would spot the incoming bombers, then hand them off to a pair of precise Würzburg radars. One Würzburg would track the bomber, the other would guide a German night fighter to the intercept. Searchlights would cone the victim, flak would tear at its wings, and the night fighter would go in for the kill. It was a terrifyingly efficient system. For the German pilots, the hunters of 1940 were now the hunted. The fear was palpable. They weren't just fighting enemy aircraft. They were fighting the oppressive, suffocating darkness itself, a darkness that now held an unseen enemy. A new ghost appeared in their skies. The whisper started in the dispersals, a word that chilled the blood. Mosquito alarm. The British de Havilland Mosquito. A phantom made of wood, it flew too high and too fast for many German fighters to catch. But these weren't just bombers. They were intruders, specifically designed to hunt the hunters. And they came with new tools. British bombers were now equipped with H2S, a centimetric radar that painted a crude map of the ground below, allowing them to navigate with uncanny accuracy over the blacked-out Reich. Their fighter escorts had improved airborne interception, or AI, radar. Most terrifying of all was a new device called Serrate. It was a homing beacon, but with a sinister twist. It didn't send out a signal, it listened. It locked onto the electronic emissions of the German Lichtenstein airborne radar, turning the night fighter's own eyes into a beacon that screamed, "Here I am!" Picture a German night fighter base on a cold, moonless night. The air is thick with the smell of aviation fuel and nervous tension. In the briefing room, the crews are given stark warnings. Keep your Lichtenstein transmissions to an absolute minimum. Use it only for the final attack. The Mosquitoes are listening. The crews nod, their faces grim. They know the choice they face. Fly blind and risk missing the bomber, or switch on their radar and risk becoming the target. A Junkers Ru-88G, its twin engines thundering, lifts off the runway and climbs into the inky black. The pilot and his radar operator are a knot of concentration, their eyes scanning the void and the green glow of their instruments. But tonight, they are not alone. Unseen, unheard, a Mosquito intruder detaches from the darkness and latches onto their tail, its own radar silently tracking them. The German crew has no idea they are being stalked. This became a deadly game of electronic chess, a duel of countermeasures fought with invisible waves. The British H2S radar, while a brilliant navigational aid, had a flaw. Its emissions could be detected by a German device called Naxos, which guided their fighters towards the bomber stream. A fix became a vulnerability. In response, British bombers carried a tail-warning radar called Monica. It was supposed to alert them to fighters approaching from behind. But the Germans developed the Flensburg detector, which homed in on Monica's transmissions. Suddenly, the device meant to save them was betraying their exact position. Bomber crews, realizing this, began desperately ripping the Monica sets out of their aircraft with their bare hands, preferring blindness to betrayal. Every solution created a new problem. Every advantage was fleeting. For the German night fighter pilot, the ground was crumbling beneath him. The very instruments he relied on for his sight, for his survival, could be the source of his own destruction. Do you trust the glowing screen that might be a death sentence? Do you switch it off and plunge into total sensory deprivation, hoping to stumble across a 200-mile-per-hour bomber in an endless sky? The psychological pressure was immense. The idea that safety no longer existed, not even over their own homeland, was unnerving. The enemy wasn't just waiting at the target. They were everywhere. A radar-guided shadow could be waiting for you as you climbed out from your own airfield, turning your sanctuary into the first leg of a trap. The night was no longer theirs. It belonged to the ghosts.
The year is 1943. The night sky over Germany, once a fortress, is about to become a hall of mirrors. Over Hamburg, cascades of aluminum foil, codenamed Window, rain down from RAF bombers. On the ground, the screens of the Würzburg radars dissolve into a blizzard of false echoes. But the intricate Kammhuber Line, a sophisticated chain of radar stations and night fighter boxes, is instantly blinded, its very foundation cracked. The era of organized, centrally controlled night defense is over. Chaos now reigns, and in chaos, the fast and the prepared are king. For the RAF, this is a golden opportunity. Slipping through the electronic snowstorm are the new Mosquito night fighters, the NF-12 and 13 variants. In their noses, they carry the advanced AIMK-8 radar, a compact, powerful set that cuts through the chaff. In the cockpit, a skilled operator hunches over his screen, learning to distinguish the faint, steady blip of a German fighter from the shimmering chaos of winder on the ground. Controllers are rapidly developing new techniques, sifting through the noise, vectoring their hunters towards fleeting contacts. The hunt has changed. It's no longer about interception in a designated box. It's about relentless pursuit in a contested sky. Meanwhile, other mosquitoes, the intruders, adopt even more sinister tactics. They don't just hunt in the bomber streams, they loiter shark-like over the very radio beacons that German night fighters use to navigate home. They circle Luftwaffe airfields like Stendal and Parchim, waiting in the darkness. For a German crew in their Ru-88 or Bf-110, the return journey becomes the most terrifying part of the mission. They are forced to fly radio silent, their navigation aids now bait in a deadly trap. Landing approaches are made with all lights extinguished, a desperate high-stakes gamble in the pitch black. And still, the terror comes. One moment, you're focused on lining up with a flare path you can barely see. The next, a sickening jolt as 20mm cannon shells tear through your wing route. No warning, no tracer, just a ghost that appeared from nowhere, fired and vanished. The fear is palpable. Every shadow, every flicker on the horizon could be an RAF Mosquito waiting for that moment of ultimate vulnerability. The pressure mounts as 1944 dawns. The skies over occupied France and the Low Countries get even more crowded, more dangerous. A new predator joins the hunt, the American P-61 Black Widow. It's a beast of a machine, purpose-built for night fighting, and in its nose sits the SCR-720 radar, a direct American evolution of the British AI sets. As the build-up to D-Day intensifies, these black-painted twin-boom fighters begin to prowl. They patrol the transport routes, guard the assembly areas, and make the night a living hell for any Luftwaffe aircraft daring to take to the air. For the German pilot, it's another radar-equipped Spectre, another set of unseen eyes that can find you, track you, and kill you before you even know you're being hunted. To be clear, the Luftwaffe is not helpless. They are innovating, fighting back with ferocity. The introduction of Schrage Music upward-firing cannons on their night fighters is a truly terrifying development for RAF Bomber Command. German pilots can now slide unseen beneath a heavy bomber and rip its belly open. This tactic brings a new kind of dread to the British aircrews. But while they score successes in the bomber streams, the fundamental dynamic has shifted. The dominant fear is now in the German cockpit. The threat is no longer a distant bomber formation, but the invisible enemy stalking them on their own turf, turning their own navigational aids and airfields into killing grounds. The beacon stacks over the Ruhr, once symbols of guidance and safety, are now magnets for predators. The journey home, the moments of takeoff and landing, are now a gauntlet of fear. This relentless pressure, this constant sense of being the prey, cannot be sustained. Something has to give. Cornered, bloodied, but far from beaten, the leadership of the Luftwaffe night fighter arm begins to formulate a new audacious plan. They have been hunted on the Allies' terms. In a battle of electronics and attrition, they are losing. Now, they will strike back. They will force a confrontation, not over the Reich, but over the hornet's nest itself. A desperate gamble is being prepared, a plan to turn the tables and meet the Allied night fighters head-on their own terms.
March 1945. For years, the skies over Britain were a fortress, but on one moonless night, the hunters became the hunted. This was Operation Gisela, the Luftwaffe's final desperate gamble. Nearly 200 German night fighters, ghosts in the dark, slipped across the channel. Their mission: to ambush unsuspecting RAF bombers returning home. For a few frantic hours, it was a massacre. Over the airfields of eastern England, German cannons ripped through Halifax and Lancaster bombers just moments from safety. Imagine you're a German pilot, your eyes straining against the blackness. Your radar operator calls out a contact. There, a fat, slow-moving bomber silhouetted against the faint glow of a distant town. You line up the shot, the gun sight steady. A burst of cannon fire, a bloom of orange flame, and the bomber falls away. A surge of elation, a victory against impossible odds. But the triumph is fleeting. A voice crackles in your headset, urgent, panicked. "Fighter behind us, break, break!" Your own radar warning receiver screams. On someone else's screen, you are no longer the hunter. You are just a blip, a solution to a firing problem. A brilliant flash, a searing pain, and the dark English countryside rushes up to meet you. Operation Gisela was a brief, brutal success, but it was a trap. British ground controllers, masters of this deadly chess game, quickly recovered. They vectored their own guardians of the night, the deadly de Havilland Mosquitoes, onto the German intruders. One by one, the German fighters were tracked, cornered, and shot down. The hunters were systematically eliminated. It was a costly lesson. The night no longer belonged to anyone. It belonged to radar. In the final grinding months of the war, this reality was absolute. Over the Rhine, American P-61 Black Widows prowled, their noses packed with sophisticated radar, their guns ready to shred anything that moved. RAF Mosquitoes haunted the approach paths to German airfields, turning the act of landing into a terrifying lottery. For Luftwaffe crews, the fear was constant. They flew with their own radars switched off, trying to hide their electronic signature, relying on frayed nerves and desperate luck. Their sanctuary, the darkness, had been turned into a transparent, sensor-ruled killing ground. So why were they so terrified? The answer is simple and profound. An enemy they could not see could now see them with lethal precision. This wasn't magic. It was a symphony of technology and tactics. It was the seamless integration of ground-controlled intercept, the eyes on the ground that guided fighters to their targets. It was the ever-improving airborne radar sets that allowed pilots to find their prey in total blackness. It was the fast, powerful twin-engine fighters like the Mosquito and the P-61, purpose-built for this new kind of war. And it was the relentless intruder tactics that carried the fight directly to the enemy's doorstep, offering no rest and no quarter. German countermeasures were clever, but they were always a step behind, blunting the Allied advantage, but never, ever reversing it. When the guns finally fell silent, the night war left an indelible mark. For the crews on both sides, the darkness would forever be filled with the ghosts of friends and foes, the green glow of a radar screen, the sudden fatal flash in the void. They carried the night in their memories for the rest of their lives. The legacy of this technological duel shaped the very future of air combat. The marriage of radar and speed, pioneered in the desperate skies over wartime Europe, became the foundation for every fighter jet that followed. The unseen war of the electrons had defined the new face of battle. The Second World War is full of these hidden technological battlegrounds that decided the fate of nations. If you want to explore more of these untold stories, from the secret codebreakers to the engineers of superweapons, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next mission.